much tired.
We're not done yet. You can't be tired. We have to tell a story.
Oh, yes, I can tell a story. That doesn't involve my arm as much.
All right,
so I can tell a story. Yes.
Tell a story.
I'm going to share with you a story that I learned on my travels in Spain. I've heard many versions of this story since. I've heard Irish versions and Russian versions and English versions, but this first version that I learned in Spain is still my favorite. So I'm going to share with you now the story of Lúsmor. There once was a man named Lúsmor. What are you doing?
I'm playing Lúsmor's theme music.
I didn't know Lúsmor had theme music.
Well, he is the hero of the story, so he needs theme music.
Right. Lúsmor was a kind and generous individual. Everybody in the village loved him, and they all thought that he would have gotten to marry the prettiest girl in the village, except for one problem. He was a humpback. There's a humpback theme too?
No, very well. No theme music for the hump.
As I say, Lúsmor was a kind and generous individual, and everybody loved him. He was always helping everybody, and every Wednesday he would travel through the forest to the village on the other side, where he would spend the day helping his old blind friend. He would clean his friend's house, he would cook his friend's meal, and then they would sit and eat and chat into the evening. But one particular Wednesday, they spent so long chatting and eating that it was quite dark when Lúsmor set out to return home. He began walking through the forest and soon became quite lost. So he sat down at the foot of a tree and went to sleep, thinking that he would awaken in the morning when the sun was up and he would be able to see to find his way home. He was awoken some time later by the sound of voices. He began following the voices, and he soon saw lights. He went towards the lights, and eventually he came to a clearing, where he saw a group of little men, no taller than a milk pail. They were dancing and singing, and the song they sang was this. Lunes y martes y miércoles tres. Lunes y martes y miércoles tres.
And what does that mean?
Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday 3. Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday 3.
Ah, I see.
Well, Lúsmor was amazed. He stood there hiding behind a tree watching the little men dancing and singing, but he soon began to grow tired of the repetitive lyrics. And so he started singing his own version very quietly, and the version he sang went like this. Lunes y martes y miércoles tres. Jueves y viernes y sábado seis.
And what does that mean?
Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday 3. Thursday and Friday and Saturday 6.
Ah, he added 3 more days.
Yes, he did. He was singing very quietly at first so as not to be heard. But soon he forgot to stay quiet, and he started singing louder and louder and louder until eventually the little men heard him. They ran over and they grabbed his legs. The eldest of the little men came forward and said, "Who are you and what are you doing here?"
Going for a walk in the woods at midnight. That's not what you said?
No.
Oh.
"I'm sorry, sir, I didn't mean to disturb you. I got lost in the woods and I heard your voices. I just came to see what was happening." The eldest of the little men said, "We heard you singing something different. What was it?"
The days of the week.
Indeed, Lúsmor demonstrated. Lunes y martes y miércoles tres. Jueves y viernes y sábado seis.
I like that song. Do it again.
Lunes y martes y miércoles tres. Jueves y viernes y sábado seis. The little men were amazed. It had never occurred to them to sing the rest of the week before. They forgot that they were angry and they let go and they started dancing and singing again. And Lúsmor was dancing and singing with them, being careful not to step on any of them. And they were having a good time singing the new song that Lúsmor had taught them. Lunes y martes y miércoles tres. Jueves y viernes y sábado seis.
It's gonna be a big hit.
Soon the sun started to come up. The eldest of the little men said, "We must go." The other little men said, "We like this fellow, let's take him with us." But the eldest of the little men said, "No, he must stay here. But I know how to ensure that he will return to sing with us again next week. I happen to know that humans think that the humps on their backs are lucky."
He doesn't know much about humans, does he?
No, he does not. If we take his hump, then he will surely return next week to retrieve it. And with that, the eldest of the little men jumped up and placed his hands on Lúsmor's back. Lúsmor stood up straight for the first time in his life. He looked around, and the little man had vanished, and he was back home in his own village. The villagers came out and said, "Who are you?" "It's me, Lúsmor." "You're not Lúsmor." Lúsmor!
Not very bright either.
No, they're not. Well, it just so happened that in this very same village lived another humpback by the name of Joaquin.
Ooh, Joaquin has pretty theme music.
Joaquin does have pretty theme music, but Joaquin is not a very pretty individual, because where Lúsmor was kind and generous, Joaquin was cruel and greedy. As soon as Joaquin heard this news, he went straight round to Lúsmor's house. He knocked on Lúsmor's door, and as soon as Lúsmor answered, Joaquin said, "Tell me what happened to you." Lúsmor, being the nice guy that he was, told Joaquin the whole story. Well, Joaquin couldn't wait until next Wednesday, when he could go and get rid of his own hump. So next Wednesday came, after dark. Joaquin walked out into the forest and wandered until he was quite lost. He sat down at the foot of a tree and waited until he fell asleep, and was awoken some time later by the sound of voices. Joaquin followed the voices, and eventually he came to the same clearing where the same little men were singing the same song that Lúsmor had taught them. Lunes y martes y miércoles tres, jueves y viernes y sábado seis. Joaquin didn't wait. He jumped out and he shouted, "Y el domingo siete!"
And what does that mean?
"And Sunday 7! But the little men were repelled by the mention of a holy day.
Plus, it doesn't fit in the song.
Also true. The eldest of the little men said, "If that's the best you can do, we don't want you coming back here after all." With that, he took Lúsmor's hump and he threw it onto Joaquin's back. Joaquin was doubled over under the weight of 2 humps. He looked around, and the little men had vanished. Joaquin was back home in his own village. The other villagers came up to him and said, "What happened to you?" And Joaquin said, "I don't want to talk about it."
Probably wise.
In the end, Joaquin died alone and miserable. And Lúsmor went on to marry the prettiest girl in the village. And to this day, when somebody says something really stupid, they always say, "Salió con el domingo siete."
And that means?
He came out with his Sunday 7.
That's a great story.
Thank you.